Good evening, everybody, and my name is Akingbogun. I'd like to start first by telling a short story. And there's a story of a young man called Peter. Peter is a civil engineer, just like I did study, and he's a very elegant, smart young man who is desirous of getting results in construction management. And for that reason, he was quite popular in the Lagos area for closing out projects in due time. One of the things that Peter was really known for was his uncompromising stand for excellence and results. And so, somehow, he always had a project that he had to do. On this occasion, he had a project in Warri. Warri is somewhere down the south of Nigeria, for those who don't already know. And he was working on a particular site. In this site, he was almost done. He had worked in there for about 2 months. At some point, the project had stalled because the sponsor of the project was giving money in small bits and pieces. Now, Peter was responsible for ensuring that all the quality of everything delivered on that site was consistent with what is expected, for a project of that size. So that evening, on the project site, a truck drove in, delivering interlocking stones. For those who know what interlocking stones are, these are those bricks that we lay on the driveway so that vehicles can drive on. And for certain kinds of, properties, you desire a particular size for your interlocking stones. And so, this truck drove in with a shipload of interlocking stones, and Peter went to inspect it to be sure whether it was good enough to be offloaded. And when Peter got to the vehicle, he looked at it and he found out that it was a bit short. And so he said he wasn't going to offload it. And he gave instructions to the site security: please do not offload that shipload of interlocking stone. Make sure that that truck returns back from wherever else it's coming from. Now, the driver of the truck was a bit miffed. I drove all the way from Lagos to Warri to deliver interlocking stones, and you're telling me that I cannot deliver or offload them here. And then Peter left instructions and said, look, whatever it is you want to do, take that truck out of this site, and he left. Now, as Peter walked away from the site, it was about some 100 meters away from the site. His house is about 15 minutes away if he has to work. And then he heard thief, thief, thief. And of course, knowing that he wasn't a thief, all he had to do was just walk away. So Peter basically just walked away, he walked on. And then they said, that's him, catch him. And then Peter turned, and he sees a building crowd of irate mob, more like an irate mob actually. And they were looking at him and pointing at him and saying, that's the thief. And then he was trying to tell them, no, it's not me. Come on, guys, you guys have gotten the wrong guy. And I was trying to be, to smile. You know how engineers do? We smile somewhat. And then they pelted him with the first stone. It was jagged-edged stone, pretty big. And then some came with some planks. And then after a while, they approached him, knocked him down, and they were still trying to talk. They hit him on the face, he fell, broke his jaw, and they didn't stop. They pelted, kicked him. Blood was flowing from his mouth. He swallowed so much blood, so much that he got the feel of the metallic feel of blood. I hope you don't get to feel it. His teeth was coated in crimson red. Life was ebbing out of him. His muscles were weak. He was still trying to plead a cause. Please, I'm not a thief. I'm just coming from... He never finished the sentence. He always had a kick somewhere in between, and he was down and beaten. At some point, he gave up, and he just decided it was time to go because there was no way he was going to save himself. And then somebody said, can we get a tire? And a disused tire was rolled over, hipped on him. And of course, he had no strength to fight. A second one, the third, they piled them up. Petrol, petrol! And then a few guys darted out of the crowd to look for petrol. Of course, a spark is not difficult to find if you know how often we smoke here in this country. That was when Peter heard the siren of the police. The police siren came in, and then a few gunshots reverberated through the environs, and a few guys darted away, and then the crowd began to open. And then the police came in, rescued this young man, pulled him out like a bag of a sack of what, sack of bones, and dumped him in their van. You know how they do, and then drove him away. He was rescued, thankfully. It's a true life story. Now, when they got to the police station, they administered some first aid to this young man. And he kind of recovered somewhat right there to open up his eyes. It was pretty swollen. The police were also good enough to arrest a few guys who were also within that space. And so they were lined up right opposite him. And then the police asked, what did he steal? And then no one could say anything. Then who instigated this mob action? And then they pointed at a fellow who was just by the side of the 6 guys that they lined up. And then they asked a friend, Peter, do you recognize anyone? Peter did recognize one person, and he happened to be the driver of the truck that delivered the inferior interlocking stones. Mob action, he was literally lynched for something he had absolutely no idea of. But this is not an isolated case, right? Because truly, he is one of those guys who in 279 cases that has happened in 3 years span, 2019 to 2022, have suffered some sort of mob action, been lynched or almost killed. 391 people have been killed in similar actions. Now, it's not just about the story, right? Because basically I'm a storyteller, and you can tell. It is a talent that I've learned over quite a number of years, because I wrote my first unpublished work when I was 10. And one of the lessons I learned from that was my dad picked up that unpublished work, which was hand scribbled, and he got his secretary to type it out, and they had it bound with my name emblazoned in gold print, like we have in our universities. It didn't take until 30 years, just about 3 decades, before I had my first published work. 4 years after, I've got 5 of it. But here's the difference. The story is real, but it's also one of the stories in my books. This is one of my latest works. It's called Dreams from Yesterday. It's got 14 incredible stories, short stories that you can read and finish in a whim. But this conversation is really not about the story. It's actually about talent. I discovered mine when I was 10. A lot of people here probably haven't even found out what their talents are. We're still floating in that space where we're trying to assume what exactly is that edge that I've got. Imagine that we're all seated here in this room and we've got the talent in each of us. If we only knew what that talent was, then maybe we could make an impact. The difference here is I could have the talent and only serve my immediate environment, my mom, parents, friends, school friends, and all of that. But guess what? The reason why you have the talent is not so you can impact just those around you. It's so you can go far and wide beyond your borders. What I learned was that by taking my talent of storytelling into a book, my books can find their ways into your bedroom, into your cars, in your kids' school bags. But not just getting there, but passing a message. What the storytelling does is the gift that has been given, but the message is the intention that we have to make happen. I am saying that this conversation is not about storytelling because the talents you've got, each and every one of us in this room, can also be used for impact. Talent for impact. Impact beyond the walls of those who are around us. I believe that when we have our talents, we find it and harness it consistently on that skill, we become so good at it that it becomes easy to make changes. You then begin to wonder, what kind of change do we really want to make? Even though my book has 14 stories, they touch on different themes. Because storytelling allows us to be able to tell a part of a scene, for instance, and look at it from a different perspective. A perspective that you are likely not to think of first. Like the story of Peter. It's easy to read in the newspaper that there was a mob action, someone was killed. But what happened to Peter afterward? I'll tell you. When Peter recovered 2 weeks after that incident, he returned back to his home state in Lagos to find that his father had passed. It was too much of a trauma for this young man that he slipped into a massive depression. He had a mental health breakdown and he didn't recover for 4 years. It was so bad that he thought and contemplated about killing himself. Now, that story looked like it was about mob actions and lynching, but it was actually about depression, which is a mental health condition that we all take very lightly. The story ends in the book about the barbaric nature in which his mother tried to get him to get well in spite of his mental condition. They took him down to the white garment churches, they locked him up, beat the hell out of him, he lost hearing in one ear. It took him 4 years to recover before they got him back to where he could make sense. But if we must harness our talent, I mentioned earlier, then we must go one step at a time. But let's look at the scenario. These are all mob actions, somewhat, right? If we must vote in an election, we will go in a good number, right? Organized, queue up, pay, or vote at the ballot, and then move on. If we need to do a referendum, for instance, where a part of the country decides that they want to be a sovereign state, people would have to come out in mass action. Numbers would account for whether they stay or not. How about the church? We've popularized church in this country. So if we need to hear some personal healing or need to speak to God, we'll go to church in huge numbers. Raise our hands up and pray to God and ask Him forgiveness or to grant us prosperity or whatever it is that catches our fancy. How about if we have to do a protest? Maybe to change government policy, what do? We also go in good numbers so that we can be heard. Now guess what? If we all were to use the mob actions to get our talents to effect societal change, do you think it's impossible for us to do? Think about this for a moment. If we all were to discover what our talents were, singing, dancing, writing, acting, bringing people together, organizing conferences, if we all channel that energy just for one societal cause, the change would be so phenomenal that we would realize that we have been idling for so long. You're wondering what change we should make. There are a lot of it. Kidnapping, rapes, hooliganism, salinity, mental health, drug abuse, addiction, religious fanaticism. All these are themes that I've put in books, short stories, designed to catch your attention for just a brief while, so that in that short time, that message can be passed and that impact can be felt. My hope as I go all the way to 50 is that I would have written 10 books before I'm 50. I'm on the 5th one, which is one per year. And afterwards, I'll bring those words to life in motion so that the message is consistent until somewhere along the line, our society will change. My charge to you is look inward, find our talent, and let's find kindred spirit so that we can move mass action to cause a change in our society. Thank you.